Unsolved, the murders of Tupac and Notorious B.I.G. is a one-off season dramatized cop detective drama. Okay, and it's about the investigation into the murders of those two famous rappers. And it's fascinating to watch. I tell you what, the writing in this show is outstanding. You get to really see the nitty-gritty, the gears turning behind the wheels of how they tried to investigate these two murders, which are still unsolved to this day. And it's a dramatized version of it. So I always wonder, every time they dramatize something, I always wonder how much truth is there in it really? How much has been embellished for entertainment purposes? But that aside, just watching it as an actual show, it was very, very engaging. And the writing, I felt, was really good, especially the dialogue. It felt so natural. Watching the detectives talk to each other and just banter. The banter in this was some of the best banter I've seen on a screen in a while, since probably a Tarantino movie. It felt so authentic, like these people were just having everyday conversations in the office. It felt very, very grounded. So that's a testament to the writers. They're really able to flesh out the story while making it engaging and feel very realistic at the same time. Almost, it felt like a documentary crew was just filming these detectives going about their work. And you get to see, they're all real life people, based on real life people. So you get to see Detective Russell Poole and his descent into obsession with the murder of Notorious B.I.G. and, to a lesser extent, Tupac, and how he thinks he's starting to uncover a grand conspiracy involving members of the LAPD who were working for Death Row Records as security. And he keeps trying to push the envelope and keep investigating this and peeling the layers and the layers, and he's getting pushback from his department saying, stop putting all your focus on this one aspect, the aspect of the police being involved. I guess they were getting a bit worried that he was going to, embarrass the department in case they actually were connected to the murder. And he sort of rides that fine line. You can't tell if he's being paranoid with his assertions and his instincts, or if he's actually onto something or not. We don't know, because it's still unsolved. And there were members of the LAPD who were moonlighting as security for Death Row Records. And so it was all up in the air, and the show just, it goes behind the scenes and just shows these detectives trying to solve this case. And then it keeps cutting between 1997 and 2006. These two investigations happening, because Josh Duhamel's character, who was also, he played it really well, Greg Kading, he gets a federal task force to re-investigate these murders and try and, put a bow on it and solve the damn thing. And even he can't do it after like 4 years of work. And it's just fascinating to watch. It was done really well. And the actors who played Tupac and Notorious B.I.G., they nailed it. They looked the part, they sounded the part. It felt very real. And I tell you what, this show just mainly focused on the investigations and a little bit on the backstory of the life of these guys. It didn't really delve much into the gangster rap culture and all that stuff, which I think is a very destructive culture in the black community. It hasn't been a net positive over the years at all. It's led to a lot of criminality. It's promoted a lot of criminality, and it's fostered a very unhealthy culture amongst the youth. But this show wasn't concerned with that. This was concerned about trying to figure out who murdered these two guys, who were cultural icons amongst their, of their time. And so I was able to just switch off from the larger implications of the whole culture of gangster rap and just get fascinated in trying to find out the intricate details behind who was involved, who wasn't involved in the murder of these guys. And so the show is an A+ as a police procedural crime thriller, in my opinion. if anyone's a fan of these two rappers, or just of police procedurals in general, or true crime, it's well worth a watch. It's very, very engaging. And the way it's made, it felt at times cinematic and at other times documentary-like. It's funny how it was able to fulfill those two roles at the same time. And you get to see Russell Poole's just sort of slowly descend into obsession with this case, and it really took a toll on his health, man. The guy ended up having practically almost a nervous breakdown, and it led him to an early grave, probably from the stress of it all and the pushback. He felt very alone. Everyone sort of turned on him, his department, his friends, his wife. He almost didn't have a friend in the world. Although his partner Miller, even though he didn't indulge his theories about the LAPD being involved, he did try to be a supportive friend to him, even after it was all said and done. But I felt bad for Russell Poole in that sense, just the way the show portrayed him. And so all I could go off is how the show portrayed these people. So whatever bias the show put into it, I have to take that, I have to just go by what was on the screen to review this show. I'll tell you what though, it was so interesting, it made me want to actually investigate what really happened more and read into the details of the real people. But also, based on the show, again, how it was portrayed, because it portrayed the birth of the feud, the East-West Coast feud. And I'll tell you what, it made it seem as though it was all Tupac misunderstanding Puff Daddy and Notorious B.I.G. Poor old Christopher Wallace in the show, the Christopher Wallace portrayed on the screen, he was like, he was dumbfounded. He didn't understand why his best buddy Tupac hated him all of a sudden. I mean, it all seemed to stem from that shooting in the lobby of the recording studio where Puffy was up the top and Notorious was up there, and they yelled out to him, "Come on up!" And Tupac got jumped by a bunch of anonymous thugs in the lobby, robbed and almost murdered. And he blamed that on Puff Daddy and Notorious B.I.G. And they got implicated based on other people's testimony too. But this was the kind of case where criminals would lie to get a lighter sentence. So you couldn't trust anything they were saying. They also would lie for notoriety. I want to be known as the guy who killed Tupac or Biggie. So you couldn't trust anything a lot of these crims that the police were interviewing to try and get a lead. You couldn't trust what they were saying, because they were probably saying it just for self-gain, just to get, some kind of privileges in prison. But Tupac blamed them for that shooting, the whole Bad Boy crew, and thus the East Coast, West Coast feud seemed to be born. And I felt bad for Christopher Wallace in the show, Notorious B.I.G., because he didn't want any part of it. He couldn't even understand why Tupac hated him or why he even thought that he would try to kill him. He had no ill will towards Tupac whatsoever. He seemed to look at him as some kind of mentor who he kept asking for advice. He looked up to the guy. So I felt bad for Biggie because he seemed to be roped in or pulled into this feud that he wanted no part of, and he harbored no ill will towards Tupac, whereas Tupac seemed to, convince himself of a larger plot and conspiracy that, based on the show, didn't seem to actually be true. So that was an interesting aspect. It was, they showed the mothers, the plight of the mothers. I felt worse in how the show portrayed the mothers. I felt worse for Christopher Wallace's mother. She seemed like a real decent woman. And yeah, I felt bad in the scenes for Tupac's mum, because obviously, it's hard to watch your son die. My God, that would have been heart-wrenching. But I think they often sanitize her backstory, Afeni Shakur. She was a full-on activist. She was involved in terrorist groups. And so, they always portray her as this great, peace-loving activist. But, I mean, if you look into her past, it's a bit more shady than that. But that aside, I'm not going to hold someone's past against them if they, move forward and denounce violence and terrorism and become peaceful people. So hopefully she did that in her later years. But yeah, look, no one wants to see anyone lose a son, even if he was involved in, the gangster rap culture and all that. And I grew up listening to it, so I'm not an outsider. I very much like Tupac's music growing up. And I very much sided with him over the Bad Boy. I didn't like Bad Boy stuff. This was in the 90s when I was very young. It wasn't until I got older that I was able to see how destructive a lot of the, themes and elements of this kind of music was. And it turned me off it completely. But I can still acknowledge Tupac was a very talented musical artist, and so was Notorious B.I.G. That they were. It's a shame they didn't utilize those talents for more positive, uplifting music. Well, some people will say that their music was uplifting and all that. I don't think so. I mean, I think the fruits of that musical movement have borne out now, and it hasn't been positive for that community. But anyway, alas, I won't get into a critique of gangster rap culture right now. I'm just critiquing this show, and the show was great. It was well done. It was well acted, well scripted, fascinating to watch. I love police procedurals, so this was, this was a prize for me. A show about something I was interested in growing up and that I was familiar with, and it showed all the backroom investigations and all the I like watching the paperwork. I like watching detectives have to fill out paperwork and write reports. I don't know why, but that level of realism is fascinating to me. Just sort of like where the show is portrayed like a day in the life of these police officers, where you get to see them have their lunch, you get to see them write their reports, have their coffee, be tired in the morning, and that stuff is just I love watching it for some reason. I don't know why. I could never be a police officer. Their job is way too difficult, too stressful, and just it'd be too heavy for me as a job. The stuff they have to deal with and see, and the horrific things they have to encounter. I could never do it, but I love watching it on TV, and it makes me appreciate them even more. So this is a great show. It's well worth a watch, even though the show kind of feels like it's pointless. It feels like it's like there's no silver lining to it at all, because the cases are unsolved. It's like a futile show, but the journey of futility from an unsolved case to, more than 20 years later, it's still being unsolved, and just watching them sort of tread water, trying to get leads that go nowhere. It's frustrating to watch, and you see the frustration in these guys. Greg Kading almost lost his family over an investigation that bore no fruit. He got no answers in the end. How frustrating must that be for the guy? His wife almost left him for a case he couldn't even solve. So, man, it was frustrating, but the show was just so engaging the way they made it that even though I knew they weren't going to get any answers by the end, I was still fascinated to see how they arrived at that point where there were no answers. So that's a testament to the creators of the show and the actors for making me believe that what they were doing was real. And so, great show. Check it out. And it's on Netflix at the moment. And thanks for listening to my rambling review. Please take care of yourselves. Like, share, subscribe. Leave a comment. Take care, be good, and I'll see you later.